Hey guys, thanks for joining in. I was actually meant to be meeting with the director, but he's hasn't been able to make it, and I'm up here enjoying the beautiful views. And I thought, well, we might as well do a video from here. So I haven't got my proper audio equipment, so apologies if it's not the greatest. But there is something I did want to cover this week. It seems to be a growing trend that's happening around the world, and it was one of the reasons we went down this week down to the IMARC conference, which is an annual mining conference that's held in Melbourne down at the exhibition centre. And there was some pretty big protests down there. So if you want to check out the full video, we've actually got that, and where we interview one of the protesters and kind of cover it there. So if you wanted to see boots on the ground, think what was happening. Got pretty rowdy. I didn't happen to capture it all on camera, but yeah, they wouldn't let me in the conference at the time, and I got to a bit of a push and shove, which is a bit of fun, why not? Yeah, check that video out if you want. But what I did want to cover is that this is a growing trend that we're seeing around the world, where people are protesting. Now, each one of these protests around the world are slightly about different things, but the growing trend that I think we're seeing at the moment that we're going to see is people basically looking for places to vent their anger and taking to the streets. And now we've seen that in multiple countries in the past few weeks, whether it's Bolivia, Hong Kong, Chile, Catalonia. We're seeing it here in Melbourne recently, and I mean that's why I really wanted to get down to IMARC, because I can hear it from my window. There's people been protesting about climate change. There's people, the Crown Casino protesters were out the other week protesting about their wages, and then this week obviously we had IMARC where they were protesting for a few days. So it's just something people need to be aware of, especially as an investor. You've got to look at this and go, well, if this trend continues, what does that mean for my investments, and what does it mean for, the state of affairs of all things, really? Because I can't see this slowing down by any stretch of the imagination. Now, this is something that I've been talking about for many years, even before I started small caps, was talking about how interest rates are going to eventually head down to 0 or -% in pretty much all countries, it's cooked into the system. Now, if you want a more detailed look at that, we did an interview with Jim Rickards, who, this guy does work for the CIA, for the US government. He's in the know. He comes to the same conclusion as well, that basically they're out of bullets. The only thing they can keep doing is lowering interest rates, which is what we're seeing. This week, we had the Federal Reserve lower interest rates by 0.25%. And we've even got Trump coming out and saying that rates should be lowered even more into negative territory. Now, in fairness, they were raised about 7 or 8 times since his administration came in, whereas they had them left at practically 0% after 2008. So it's just something to keep in mindful of, because in 2008, obviously, the banks got bailed out, people got put on the hook, people weren't happy with it, but life kind of went on. This next collapse, if it comes, which I do think it will eventually, it's not banks that are bankrupt, you're looking at governments that are bankrupt. And my question to you is, and if you disagree, put it down in the comments below how you think we're going to get out of this or what the solution is. But you're looking at all the governments, they're practically bankrupt. The only way they're keeping things going is by lowering rates and printing money, basically to keep things, keep the wheels churning. But we're seeing that global slowdown. Now, one of the things that always gets blamed in the mainstream media is it's to do with this US-China trade war. Now, look, not to say that doesn't have an impact, and it definitely has an impact on sentiment, but you're looking at countries where the auto sales are dropping, and all these sectors are dropping. And it's got absolutely nothing. They're not tied to the US or China whatsoever. So it's a global slowdown. We're seeing interest rates around the world being dropped. Last time I checked, there was 4 countries that have got their central banks in negative interest rate territory. There's 20 at 0%. And I think those numbers are going to grow over the coming years. And now to combine those two things, you've got people protesting on the streets, you've got the economy slowing down. The biggest thing people protest about is not having enough money and not having jobs. So if that trend does continue, we're going to see more people out on the streets, anti-establishment marches and these sort of things going on. People just get angry and they're going to take to the streets. This isn't doom or gloom. This is just history. We've seen the French Revolution and those sort of things. I do think there's a really big anti-establishment awakening, or whatever you want to call it, happening around the world at the moment. It's not a unified message. People have got different solutions and what they think's wrong and what they think's going on. But the main thing is people are realizing that something's not right. The system's broken. A lot of them are starting to work out how the monetary system actually works and how it's designed to basically favor not even the 1%. It's like the 1% of the 1%. for so long, people haven't known about these things, and now they're coming to light, and they're basically fed up. They realise that this system doesn't work for them. The politicians don't serve them. I mean, this is something I've been trying to bring up for years as well. I don't even know why people. I mean, everyone talks about how politicians are corrupt, but then every 4 years they go vote for their party and they think it's going to change. And I think people are starting to realise that it doesn't really matter which party gets in. It's pretty much business as usual that goes ahead on the top line level. Like, you might see some things on the lower level, like, you know, we're going to pass same-sex marriage laws, or, you know, these, not to say they're non-issues, but let's be honest. I mean, when it comes to war and these sort of things, it's the same old stuff. Doesn't matter what party gets in, and there is a global agenda that's happening, and people are waking up to it. Now, what does this mean for investments? Well, people do look for safe haven assets during these times. So if this does play out, you might want to start looking at that. This is not financial investment advice, but it's just something to take into consideration, that if we do see this trend continue, you've got to take into consideration, what does this mean for markets? And it's not to say, look, the stock market's going to crash. It might even go higher because they might lower rates. They're probably going to go bring in more quantitative easing, which has been talked about even here in Australia. This was ridiculed a few years ago. I remember I was talking about this 4 or 5 years ago with people, and they thought I was nuts. And now it's mainstream news. They're talking about it. Well, we need to get used to a world of negative interest rates and quantitative easing as if it's normal. It's not normal. And people need to be aware of this. And I mean, if you play your cards right, one of the biggest wealth transfers in history is likely to take place in the coming years. So, I mean, that's the way I look at it. And that's why you've got people going into these other assets, and you're seeing things like cryptocurrency even, where people are trying to get outside that system and you know, create their own that's not manipulated or as manipulated and controlled by such a handful. And speaking of interest rates, I have gone public, and I did say over a year and a half ago, it was about 2 years ago actually, that we'd see 0% interest rates in Australia by, I think it was the end of 2020. So I've still got 12 months to run on that. I do think we're on track for that, and I do think in the US we're probably going to see the same thing. Once again, when I was talking about that, people thought it was crazy, but now it's not so crazy anymore. You just need to look at the record levels of debt and just ask yourself, like, where do you see, if you disagree, where do you see this influx of jobs and money and coming in? Because, I mean, more and more things are being automated. Meanwhile, you've got companies like your Googles, your Amazons, and these sort of guys that are paying absolutely no tax. And then you've got the ATO that's saying they're going to go after small business owners. Like, it's absolutely bananas. So look, I'd love to get some conversation going around this, because for so long, this conversation you couldn't even get a conversation on it, even just trying to say, look, hey, I think interest rates are going to zero, or what do you think is going to happen with the US? I mean, they're $2 trillion in debt. Their unfunded liabilities is in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. It's never going to get paid back. This Medicaid and people thinking they're going to retire in their super, I mean, they need a wake-up call. So, and I think we've always thought that these things happen in other countries, whereas I think we need to be a bit smarter and realise that, well, hang on, this system's now globally integrated, and if you know, a few dominoes start to fall overseas, it's going to happen. It's going to spread pretty quick. So not to spread doom and gloom. I am forever the optimist. I think after this plays out, things are going to get better, but it is a growing trend with the people uprising in the streets. And I think there is going to be a period of chaos that's coming. And I think, look, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So be it. If I'm right, it's probably better that you're prepared at least a little bit for that. And if anything, mate, you might even be able to benefit from that. So, yeah, keen to get your thoughts below. Let me know what you think. Do you see this playing out? Do you see some sort of solution coming? Or do you think I'm just overreacting to 2 weeks or a few weeks or whatever it's been of like wild protests around the world?